honestly surprised a lot of these are still up.
Yeah, agreed.
I wonder if they'll pull them as soon as we get news one way or the other.
Yeah, that wouldn't be surprising.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Live Before Lock show. Sounds weird saying that. I don't believe Adam and I have ever done a Live Before Lock show together in all our years of doing this show. It's presented by No House Advantage. I'm Dave Loughran on the Twitters at Laffy_D, joined by Adam Scherer at Ship My Money DFS. This guy just lives to cause other people pain. Last night I was watching as you just toyed with this Rockets writer and tried to make him delete his Twitter account. You may have been successful. What's going on, man?
Yeah, not much. I was bored during the first half of that game last night, and wasn't out at a bar, so I didn't really have anything to do. So I just started messing with Rockets writers.
Yeah, when you go away for vacation to Glacier National Park, what are you going to do in all those spots where you don't have any service?
I've thought about that, and on the one hand, I'm really excited for it because it'll be nice to like actually disconnect and not be around. But like, I'm also just in the habit of like, whenever I have 3 seconds of downtime, like doing something on my phone, and it's really going to be a problem.
It'll be nice to get somewhat of a respite from all of that shit, you know, because
yeah, it'll be great because like I won't have a choice.
Right. Exactly.
It's not like when I tried to start limiting my time on Twitter by like putting a thing on my phone that like doesn't let me on, but it says, do you want to ignore this? And I just say, yeah.
Right. You know, one day you told me that you could actually limit social media on the iPhone, right?
Right.
So I tried it. Did not work. I can't tell you how many times I just powered through that notification because
I still have it set.
Me too.
And normally it's like 11 in the morning. It's like you've reached your limit. And I'm just like, okay, well, we're going to ignore that.
It happened before where I stay up till like 1:30 a.m. and I wake up the next morning and I'm already limited. I'm already out.
Yeah. Yep. I've done that. Like normally, especially if there's like, for whatever reason, a sweat that goes till like 1 or 1:30 or something, I'll like be on Twitter because like I'm just still up watching the game. And then it's just like, oh, I'm already there.
Yeah. It's almost embarrassing. It's almost humiliating.
Yeah. It's not great.
It's not, but I'll say this much. It's so easy to just power through that. Like they need to set a true block to where you got to call somebody to get it lifted.
Right. They need to do it like DraftKings and FanDuel do it, where it's like, if you tell them you're not playing for a month, they will not let you play for a month.
I know someone who's self-excluded for 5 years.
I feel like I've heard that from somebody too. And they just like couldn't get back.
Yeah. And I thought to myself, my God, what have you done? You know, no, thank you. I mean, maybe take a little break, but 5 years, that sounds miserable. Another thing that sounded miserable earlier today was trying to guess whether or not James Harden was going to play. We've got the Bucks. We've got the Brooklyn Nets. One game today, a ton of things to break down. And we're happy to have you guys with us. We got 700 people in the room already. We just kicked this off at 7:30 on a Tuesday night. So appreciate all of you for hanging out. And despite almost having already 100 likes, if you walked into the room virtually, of course, and forgot to do so, I won't hold it against you. But hit that thumbs up, make it the first thing you do, and subscribe to the channel. We're at 55,500 subscribers, making that push to 60K. All your help, greatly appreciated, so we can keep putting out free content that hopefully all of you guys really love. All right. As I was talking about with James Harden, just quickly, yes or no, maybe a quick thought process on this because we're going to dive into it. The Brooklyn Nets went from 4.5-point home dogs to 2-point dogs, 217 total. Is James Harden playing tonight?
My guess is yes. He went from out to doubtful to questionable. They said he's expected to play. He went through shoot around, didn't have any issues. He's going to test it out on the court. I'm assuming he plays. I think the biggest question is just, and I don't think we're going to get a real answer, is how much is he going to play? How does he actually feel? Is this James Harden saying, yeah, I'll tough it out, and you're just hoping he doesn't end up looking like Anthony Davis? Or is this James Harden actually feels good?
Yep, that's the biggest question. We'll dive into that right after we recap this series because I do think it's kind of important to touch on. The Bucks went down 0-2 in the series. They looked dead. I mean, they looked as bad as any team could in an Eastern or in a conference semifinals matchup. Both games. First one, blowout. Second one, They were down by 50 plus points at one point. At no time in that game was it competitive. And then they catch some breaks, right? Game 3, Harden was still out, but they got the win barely. Nail biter with Middleton getting that last shot at the final seconds. And then game 4 with Kyrie Irving going down, they got a healthy win over the Brooklyn Nets, down 2 of their top 3 players, really 2/3 of the team when you think about it, if you're not including Joe Harris. So going into this one, how do you view it? And how do you look back at the previous 4 games, given how much just not volatility, but how everything's been in flux through the first 4 games, so many moving parts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to get a good read on it because, like you said, there have been so many moving parts. You've had so many injuries to Brooklyn. Harden basically missing every minute of the series except one. Then you had Irving hurt, but at the same time, last game you did see some positive things from the Bucks. For one, you've seen Chris Middleton shoot better as the series has gone on, but also you saw more potential assists for Middleton and Giannis last game. Through the first couple of games, they were really getting in trouble because they were just having so many ISO possessions and just not moving the ball at all. Last game, you saw potential assists get back closer to the norm for those guys, which is really good to see. And I think something that they'll have to do going forward. So while, they of course benefited from Irving getting hurt during that game and Harden already being out, you did see them actually make some changes and start to do things better. So I think it's really, really difficult to get a firm gauge on what to expect here. Like if Harden, Irving, and Durant were all full strength, I'd feel pretty comfortable saying the Nets are just better. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. But we know Irving's out. We assume Harden is, if he does play, still less than 100% by at least some amount. It's not like Milwaukee's a bad team. You're not talking about like, if this were the first round and it were like Brooklyn versus the Wizards and you're saying, maybe the Wizards can make a run with Harden and Irving out. Like the Bucks are a very, very good team. I think even if Harden comes back here, this is a pretty balanced matchup.
The other day when you and I were doing the Phoenix Denver game and we did the showdown slate, and afterwards we said, hey, that was a good show. We had the topics and everything. We felt good about it. I told Tom, I was like, dude, we had the topics. It was a great show. He's like, all I saw was you and Adam talking about him being naked in his apartment and drinking White Claws for 10 minutes. And I thought, well, that's the one part of the show that he saw. And of course it was the worst part.
Yeah. Well, I'm not the one that scheduled it for like 8:30 at night.
Oh, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant in the sense that like you had all the topics lined up. We were like, that was a good show right there. And then of course I still think it was. James Harden, though, game time decision coming into this. We've already talked about it. We both think he plays, right? I'm a little bit concerned here. You mentioned the fact that could it be an Anthony Davis-esque situation where they force him back into action, they see the writing on the wall and know they need to do something, or is this a scenario where James Harden is actually there? I mean, it sounds like he's been the one lobbying to play, which I think is always a good thing because I'm of the belief, right, that the player knows his body better than anyone else. I think they're also more willing to make kind of flippant decisions at times because they don't want to see themselves lose a series when they should certainly win and we're up 2-0. But it's less for me, and I think you and I might be on slightly different pages here. It is less for me about the concern for me is less about how many minutes Nash gives Harden than how is Harden going to look out there, and is that going to impact his minutes?
Yeah, and I think in the same vein, the concern for me is it's a hamstring injury, and these things get re-aggravated pretty frequently. So not only is it, how is he going to look? He hasn't played in a couple of weeks, and we don't know, how healthy he really is, but he can pretty easily just re-injure it and not, James Harden to the locker room doesn't come back. So there's definitely risk, but the thing that makes it really difficult too is that the price is so cheap. If James Harden we knew he was 100%, he's coming into this game, he's playing 40 to 42 minutes, he would be the most expensive guy on the slate. But on DraftKings, he's cheaper than Durant, he's cheaper than Giannis. I messaged you earlier, I did some builds before the show, and it was just like, man, I really think that you're either going to have James Harden like at captain, or at least in your lineup, but likely at captain to have a chance at winning, or it's going to give you a 0% chance of winning. Like it just almost feels like it's one or the other, and we don't really have a good idea of which one it's going to be because we don't know exactly what the minutes are going to look like. We don't know how he's going to look, and of course, there's some percentage chance that he just gets hurt.
So with that in mind, is this one? Let me say this much too: his ownership right now has pulled Kevin Durant's ownership down a ton. Earlier in the day, Durant was up around like 90% on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he was, I think, almost as high, maybe even higher, but you get the point. He was up there in the 90% range on both of them. Now, when you look at it, it's clearly changed because James Harden coming into this game means Giannis Antetokounmpo becomes the clear top option from an ownership standpoint. And then it's Durant or Harden. Right now, as it stands, we have Kevin Durant getting more ownership than Harden on DraftKings, and about probably 70% more ownership at the captain spot. Well, 17% to 11%. On FanDuel, you've got James Harden at 43% projected ownership. Kevin Durant $1,000 more at 71.7. So, Harden's not getting obscene ownership. And like you were saying, if he was playing full minutes, 40 minutes healthy, he's going to be the highest owned captain, probably even over Giannis, or at least neck and neck.
Yeah, I think the ownership here makes me really inclined to take a chance on Harden. And obviously, we'll hopefully get news during this show. But right now, going under the assumption that we get news that Harden is starting, but we don't get any sort of like hard minutes cap, we get something like they'll monitor his minutes, right? Where they're just going to say, yeah, if he feels good, he's going to play. It's a playoff game. The series is tied 2-2. We need James Harden. So for now, that's my assumption. If that's the information that we end up with, I think the ownership right now is very, very appealing for tournaments because he's cheap enough. Like it's only a 1-game slate. So it's not like you're foregoing like a really strong mid-range of guys. Middleton's actually priced up. Holiday's relatively expensive. Brook Lopez, kind of who cares. He's priced up a bit too. So it's not like you have a bunch of other options with it being a 1-game slate. I think at his salary, you can do some things with Harden at captain at low ownership that does open up some stuff that you can't quite get to if you go with Giannis or you go with Durant. I think even at 50% ownership overall on DraftKings and what was it, 40 something?
Around 40.
43 on FanDuel. I think that the upside is there. I mean, there's no question that being the third
Harden's active.
Okay, now we just need him to start.
Yeah, I mean, we expected him to play. So.
Yeah. There's no question that James Harden has the potential to be an absolute must in your lineup as the third most expensive guy on the slate. Like, there's just no doubt about it, especially when you talk about Irving being out, because Harden, he's averaged 1.5 fantasy points per minute this year with Durant on the floor and Irving off. He's averaged over 1.7 when they're both off, which you expect them to stagger their minutes. So, not a ton because Durant's probably going to play like 42 minutes anyway. So you're talking like 6 minutes without him, but still that's, 6 minutes of very, very good production if he's healthy. It's not hard to see how Harden just kills your lineups. All you have to do is go back to when Anthony Davis played through his injury, but it's also not hard to see how Harden is like a must-have. So to me, especially in tournaments, as long as the ownership stays relatively low, the amount of money you can win by rostering James Harden over the field, I think, outweighs the risks, in my opinion.
Dude, we haven't projected at 9% ownership in the MVP spot on FanDuel.
Yeah, to me, that's just a spot where normally on FanDuel, we kind of talk about, like, normally you don't get situations where you can take on risk in the cap or in the MVP spot
and have room for the clear highest fantasy performance.
Right, exactly. Like it's always, we kind of talk about how FanDuel's single game format kind of sucks because the salary doesn't change. So it's just like there's only so many guys you can really play there unless you're just praying somebody gets hurt or something like that. You have a pretty weird situation here where if James Harden is 100% and if James Harden does play like 36 plus minutes, he can very easily just be the highest scorer on the slate, and he's going to be low owned because obviously there is a lot of risk.
Anytime you get this opportunity, you have to at least consider taking it, because neither of you or myself are mind readers. We don't know how many minutes he's going to play tonight. If James Harden plays 40 minutes, my God, you have to think about it. It's one of the best showdown opportunities you can get when it comes to taking risk. Very rarely do you see a scenario like this where his status is very much in question. Not that he's going to play, but if he's 100%, if he'll play well, if he's going to get the minutes, if he's healthy enough. If the stars align, then it's going to be huge. Now, you would make the same argument against him, right? If it was, well, everyone just assumes Harden's going to be fine and his ownership is super high, but it's the complete opposite of that tonight. So you have to take the opposite approach.
Yeah, exactly. I actually think, and normally this isn't the case in like any situation, I think this is actually a more interesting conversation for cash than it is for tournaments, because I think that in tournaments, it's pretty easy. You just do the opposite. Like if we update ownership projections before lock, and we're thinking everybody's going to roster Harden, then like for example, let's say we get news that it's like Harden not limited, right? So his ownership will clearly go up, but you know that re-injury risk is still there. You know that there's still a lot of things that can go wrong. Then, it's like, okay, well, I'll just not play James Harden. I'll hope that he has a disappointing game, and I can pass all the people that play him. But right now, assuming that everyone's reacting more to the risk of rostering him, just do the opposite in tournaments because the reward is there. In cash games, I think it's a lot less clear because the reward obviously is there in the sense of if you roster Harden and he does well, you're going to, and other people don't, you're just going to win your cash games, which is great. But just, obviously the way the format goes, you're looking to take on a little bit less risk. It's just, I'm not completely sure if you're taking on more risk by not rostering him or by rostering him at his price.
It's a good point. What else do we do at the captain spot? Of course, we want to take some risk with James Harden, just given the upside. I think we've outlined that pretty well. But you also have Giannis getting 32% captain spot ownership on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's at 58% in the MVP spot right now. It clearly still the top option in terms of ownership here, especially in the captain and the MVP spot. James Harden changes that a little bit, but mostly affected somebody like Kevin Durant. How do we approach the captain spot or the MVP spot, of course, with guys like Giannis and Kevin Durant now that Harden is back in the mix? Yeah,
so Harden playing, I think, moves Giannis a little bit ahead of Durant for me, especially because he's not quite as expensive. Again, this is a situation where if the ownership is drastically different, like for example, 57% MVP ownership for Giannis, 27% for Durant on FanDuel, Durant's still a very good play given that ownership gap. I think that Giannis projects a bit higher, but when you're thinking range of outcomes, Durant still has that same upside. It's not like Giannis has played particularly well from a fantasy standpoint in this series. He's only averaged 1.38 DraftKings points per minute. You've seen the assist numbers drop substantially from where he was during the regular season, which again, like I said, last game, he turned it around, but we don't know what it's going to look like tonight. He hasn't produced at a very high level so far. So it's pretty easy to see how Durant still has a bigger game. They are still without Kyrie Irving as well. But I think from just a medium projection standpoint, what's more likely to happen, I think Giannis is likely to outscore Durant more than 50% of the time, and he's less expensive. So I think that Harden being in is a bump for Giannis because it pulls Durant's projection down and makes Giannis look a little bit better. So that ownership does make sense. But again, when you're thinking beyond just medium projections, Durant probably still outscores Giannis something like 40 to 45% of the time here.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how many lineups on DraftKings are like Kevin Durant, Giannis, Harden, Claxton, Portis, and Forbes, because it's actually possible to play all three of them and then get three guys that are at least in the rotation in the bottom three utility spots. I swear it's going to happen for sure a lot.
What was the example you used?
So it would be Durant at captain, not Giannis, but you can play Durant, Giannis, and Harden, and then you're throwing in like Claxton, Portis, and Forbes and zeroing out your salary.
Yeah, you're pretty much describing what I have in cash right now.
Okay. I figured
not that exact lineup, but that's the build.
But same approach.
Yeah, and I think, and it's a difficult slate because there's not really any 1K. You don't have that $1,400 Derek Favors, $1,600 or whatever it was, Patrick Beverley. Like the only 1K guy that might play or that you would expect to play like a minute tonight is the other Antetokounmpo, and he might literally play 1 minute. So there's not that really, really cheap group, but there is, the Claxton, Portis, like these guys at least have some upside around, 2,400, 3,200, and it lets you get those other guys in. The other thing that makes it kind of difficult and kind of, I think, at least in cash, makes me go towards that build, Middleton and Holiday are 9,800 and 9K on DraftKings. If they were a little bit less expensive, I think it would be more advantageous to say like, okay, I'll forego one of Giannis, Durant, Harden, but the pricing is so close. It really just goes back to the Harden thing though, because if you think like if we get word that Harden's going to be limited, or if you just are hoping that he's not going to be 100%, Middleton's going to play like 40 plus minutes. Middleton would be a very good guy to use instead of Harden, and then you can play somebody maybe a little bit better than those bottom tier guys. But if you assume Harden is playing close to normal minutes, there's no reason really that you're going to Middleton instead of Harden when the price is that close.
You know what I hope happens tonight?
Bless you.
I got to that mute button real quick. Like last second. Here's what I think happens tonight, or I hope happens tonight. I hope Steve Nash comes out and says, we will monitor James Harden's minutes.
I think that's the most likely thing, right? Because
wouldn't it be great though?
Yeah, and well, it wouldn't make my life any easier, but I kind of would rather, if I end up with James Harden in my cash lineup, I'm hoping that it's a monitored minutes and then he just plays full minutes, because I would obviously like the ownership to be lower. But at the same time, I would just feel a little bit better if he's just like, yeah, he's not on a minutes restriction, because I know who I'm playing.
Yeah, but I think monitoring minutes creates like the best opportunities, because
it keeps the ownership down.
It keeps the ownership down, but it also doesn't mean they're going to be limited. I mean, Scott Brooks is the king of this. Bradley
it means nothing.
It means nothing. Bradley Beal's minutes will be monitored. Okay, that means if he looks healthy and it doesn't look like he's struggling out there, he's going to play the exact same minutes he always plays.
Right. And I, like I said, I think that's the most likely outcome. And like you're saying, minutes monitored means absolutely nothing, because I can tell you right now that if James Harden looks good, he's going to play as many minutes as he's allowed to. And if he looks bad or gets hurt, he won't. That's all minutes monitored is saying. And it's not giving you a number. Like if they say Harden, we're hoping to get 28 to 30 minutes from Harden, that at least means something. If they say there's no limit, that means something. Minutes monitored basically just means as long as he feels good, he's playing, which I can tell you right now is the case.
Right, exactly. But you know what it does is it kind of creates a smoke screen, and it confuses people, you know, and then they second guess it and they think, oh, I don't like the idea of that. But really, we've seen it time and time again. It doesn't mean shit. It just means if you're fine, you're fine. If you're not, you're not. But it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because guess what? If he wasn't limited at all and he ended up tweaking his hammy again, it doesn't matter. Like it's the same thing. So
right, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think really, assuming that's the information we get, assuming we don't get any sort of hard cap and we don't get confirmation that he's 100% not limited, I think it really just comes down to your risk tolerance. Like for me, I'm inclined to go Harden, you know, and again, I think the math changes depending on the formats. In tournaments, if you're playing tournaments, you should be more inclined to do the opposite of whatever the field is doing on Harden. In cash, I think it really comes down to your risk tolerance. Right now, I'm leaning towards just going with him and hoping for the best. I don't think that, you know, it's a must. You know, I'm probably a little bit less risk averse than some people, and that's fine. But yeah, I think that basically the smaller field stuff, the lower the payout is, the lower the reward is, the more it kind of just comes down to your risk tolerance and what you're willing to do. Because we're probably not going to have a very firm, you know, a very clear answer going into this game.
And what I'm saying is I hope we don't.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. You brought up a good point a moment ago about Middleton and Holiday. It does feel like the opportunity cost there is so high now that Harden is playing. When Harden was out or even doubtful, you're looking at Middleton and Holiday and going, all right, I can easily go Durant or Giannis, Durant, Middleton, or Durant, Giannis, Holiday, no problem, and still get, you know, decent enough filler options in down there at the bottom. But now it's like, all right, do I want to take the shot? Do I want to take the risk on a low-owned Harden? Or do I want to get to Middleton and Holiday, who's, you know, only $1,200 cheaper and then $2,000 cheaper, both of whom are good. This isn't to say that Drew Holiday doesn't have, you know, a legitimately high ceiling. He does. And I even talked to Josh this morning about, hey, you know, what's the possibility, or what do you think about Drew Holiday in the captain spot? This, of course, was with James Harden out. But now it just throws a wrench into the works, and it's so much harder to get there, especially given Harden's ownership. So break down Middleton and Holiday a little bit more here, just given their salaries on DraftKings at 98 and 9,000, and then on FanDuel too.
Well, and here's the other thing that I think makes it tough to get to those guys, especially in any sort of like optimal format. It's different if you're talking tournaments, or like if you're not playing Harden, obviously you can just play like Middleton or Drew. It's going to be pretty easy. But if you're just building a lineup and you're assuming that Harden is like close to full strength, here's the other reason why the price makes it really difficult. Like if you go right now, I have like, if you put Harden at captain, you have Giannis. So like, let's say, okay, I'm going to upgrade one of those cheap guys. I can go from Bobby Portis to PJ Tucker. Like really, who gives a shit? Like, is that really worth going from Kevin Durant to Chris Middleton? You know, it would be one thing if like Brooke Lopez were 52 or Tucker's price, and you could go from Portis to Lopez. But like PJ Tucker can play 3 times as many minutes as Portis and score the same fantasy points. So that's, a pretty big drop going from Durant to Middleton, just as the first example I looked at. But the point being that the pricing is everyone's so priced up. Even Joe Harris is 8,400. Brook Lopez is 7,600. There's nothing really in the mid range. I mean, Blake Griffin at 6,800, sure, but you're not going to even feel great about that.
Especially with Harden back.
Yeah, with Harden back. You and I talked before about how it really doesn't matter who Blake Griffin is on the floor with, as long as it is not James Harden. He does well, and when it's Harden, he takes a big step back. So there's just it's really, really tough, I think, unless you're just doing it for ownership considerations or because you just don't trust Harden at all, which again is fine. It's really tough to do that. So the pricing, I think, just makes it really, really difficult. So
go ahead.
One thing to point out, not roster construction wise, but Drew Holiday, I think if you can get him into lineups, he is someone that in general you should be looking to roster here. I think just based on what we've seen this series, he's been really bad through 4 games. He's averaged 0.74 DraftKings points per minute. But this is one of those situations where the minutes are still there. The usage is down a little bit from the regular season. The assist percentage is down a little bit from the regular season, but mostly he's just shooting really, really poorly. His usage rate during the regular season when Giannis and Middleton played was about 21%. In the series so far against Brooklyn, it's 18.9%. In the regular season, his assist percentage was about 25%. In this series, it's about 22%. So yeah, there's a little bit of a drop off, but he's gone from averaging 1.12 DraftKings points per minute to 0.74. That drop off in rates does not account for losing 33% of your per minute production. What does account for it is going from being a 50+% field goal percentage to 39%, going from shooting 39 or 37% on threes to 30%. That's just stuff that isn't going to continue long term. So those are the types of players where, as a general rule in DFS, when they're performing that poorly, their ownership naturally comes down because people don't trust them. They look at game logs, at least to some extent. But the only real issue is that he's missing shots, which, yeah, that happens. So I do, from like a more macro view, I like Holiday. I just don't really know how easy it is to get him into lineups, especially if you are paying up at captain.
Does it surprise you that ownership is basically Giannis, Durant, Harden, right? That's not the surprising part. But then, like on FanDuel, Holiday, then Chris Middleton. And then Holiday, Green, Chris Middleton on DraftKings. Does it surprise you that the 2 upper mid-range guys or even lower high-tier guys are 4th and 5th in ownership behind Giannis, Durant, and Harden? Because that tells me that you're going to see a lot of lineups, if ownership is accurate, that only have 2 of the 3 big players, because otherwise you can't fit Harden or you can't fit Holiday or Middleton into those lineups with all 3.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too surprising because those guys do at least still give you that 50 fantasy point upside.
Right.
And the alternative, like we know not everyone is going to play all 3 of those guys, especially because there are so many concerns over Harden.
And Harden has so much downside. Yeah, or risk at least. Yeah.
Right. And the obvious next thing is you're going to go to Holiday, you're going to go to Middleton because, Brook Lopez at 7,600 isn't really getting you excited. 8,400, Joe Harris certainly isn't. So, yeah, I think that makes sense. And then the other thing that we haven't mentioned yet, and I saw it mentioned in chat, there is at least one value. For the most part, value tonight isn't very good. But assuming Jeff Green starts this game, he started the second half last game. He played 26 and a half minutes despite being on a minutes restriction. Again, going back to what coaches say, meaning nothing. Assuming he starts this game, he averaged 30 minutes per game in his starts during the regular season, 0.7 DraftKings points per minute. If you're going to get around 30 minutes from Jeff Green at 4K, that is a guy that I think you actually could, in some builds, put at captain. It'll let you get away from that build that you were talking about where you pay down for 3 guys and you pay up for 3 guys. Again, you're obviously taking on it. You're walking a pretty tight line by doing that because you need like none of Durant, none of the top guys to just go absolutely nuclear. But it does let you get a lot of really good plays into your lineup if you go Jeff Green, the captain. That's how I think you can start getting some Middleton and Drew pretty easily.
So Green's not starting.
Oh, we got a starting lineup?
Yeah, it's Harden, Brown, Harris, Durant, Griffin.
Okay, so that makes Green, I mean, it certainly makes him riskier. Like I'm taking a few minutes off of him.
His points prop right now, does Jeff Green even have one? Oh, he doesn't even have a points prop. It's a little surprising. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean,
go ahead.
What I did, and this is still, the rotation is going to be, especially the Bruce Brown part of the rotation, is going to just be, I think, to at least some extent, hot hand situation. Like we've seen Brown play, 30, 34 minutes or so in games this series. And then you saw him last game not even start the second half. He ended up playing like 21 or 22 minutes. Jeff Green played 26 off the bench. I think that it's reasonable to just kind of assume you get around 26 minutes for either guy. But if Brown plays really well, that can certainly take minutes away from Green and vice versa.
This question becomes a lot more relevant now. We got a super chat from Gabriel Meafrin, says Pat Connaughton or Jeff Green, last man in on DraftKings.
I think it's still Jeff Green. There's just a variety of ways for him to get there. Played those 26 minutes last game. He can get some minutes as the backup center. He can take minutes from Griffin. He can take minutes from Claxton. He can play the 4. There's a lot of ways for him to get on the floor. And then the other thing is that even though Connaughton had that really good game last game, nothing really changed. He played about 20 minutes outside of garbage time, 22 minutes overall, which was the most non-garbage time minutes he's played in the game, but it's still only 20 minutes. He had 4 steals and 2 blocks. You're not expecting that to happen again. I think you're probably getting fewer minutes from Connaughton. He's not a drastically different fantasy producer than Jeff Green is. So I lean towards Green as long as, we're just talking projections and not factoring in ownership or anything.
Let's make the transition to punt plays. Before we do those, let's say what's up to our sponsor, No House Advantage. You already know, right? Or at least you should. All 1,300 of you watching right now. No House Advantage, peer-to-peer player prop platform where we built tools specifically for No House Advantage at Awesemo. They're entirely free, 24/7, 365. You never have to pay for them. You got the player prop tool for No House Advantage. You got the optimal lineup tool. And when you sign up and deposit for your first time using the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, you get a $20 sign up bonus when you do. So you got to check this out. It's a very cool format. And like other sites, you have GPP style contests, right? You build a lineup, except outside of building, or instead of building them with a salary or building them with a salary cap where each player has a price, you're just taking props. And that's a lot of fun, especially if you're already a sports bettor. But even if you're not, maybe certain betting isn't legal in your state. This is one way to do it and play against your peers, have a large field of people that you're going up against. And it's a great way to build a bankroll because a lot of times these smaller sites, the goal is that you stick around, you win some money. And we've had a lot of people build their bankroll, win money playing over at No House Advantage. So check it out. Use the promo code Awesemo. And more than anything, use the tools for free. They're at your disposal. And the last thing I'll say here, if you're going to go over there and you're going to take the leap, remember, these props are static. They're not like other books where money and where money can swing the line throughout the day. If Kevin Durant's points prop was at 37.5 and James Harden was out, James Harden gets ruled in, that points prop is still going to be 37.5. And you might say, well, wouldn't everyone notice that? No, don't give your competition that much credit. There are enough people that will miss that will give you an advantage. So lots of ways to win over there, especially when you put the time in and find those edges like that. Go there, nohouseadvantage.com, or download it in the App Store or Google Play and check that out today. Remember, get that $20 too when you sign up using the promo code Awesemo. All right, Adam, let's talk about some punts. The first question I'll ask you is, how optimal in tournaments is the idea of playing the big 3 and punting with 3 of those just really cheap options?
I think it's good. I mean, there's a good chance that you need all 3 of those guys. I mean, like we talked about when we were talking about Harden and Middleton, the gap isn't that big in their salaries. So there's whatever the percent chance, basically whatever the percent chance is that James Harden has a good game, you're probably going to need all 3 guys because we assume Giannis is going to have a good game. You assume Durant's going to have a good game. Harden, obviously is the biggest question mark. So if you're going with all those guys, you're just kind of forced to pay down. And then again, the mid-range just isn't very strong either. There's plenty of reasons not to like a lot of the cheap guys on this slate, but at least they're half price compared to Bruce Brown and Blake Griffin and those guys. So yeah, I think it's a good build. I mean, it's not going to be sneaky, but it's a 1-game slate. And in NBA in particular, normally if you're doing something quote unquote sneaky, you're probably just doing something dumb.
Right. And that's a good point. Are there any ways to be even remotely sneaky with something like this? Because it feels like, again, a Durant, Giannis, Harden, Forbes, Portis, Claxton lineup, which fits perfectly, is going to be extraordinarily popular. One way that you could be a little bit different, though, like we talked about earlier, and we're going to get into some of these punts, play Harden at the captain spot, and you can play a lot of the same punts. You can still play Durant. You can still play Giannis. But now You mix it up to where Harden's getting like 9 or 10% captain spot percentage aside, compared to Giannis at like 30% and Durant close to 20. So I think there are some ways to differentiate. I just don't know if you want to leave the reservation so far that you end up doing something dumb and one of your guys never leaves the bench.
I think the best way to do it on a slate like this, where you have the question marks around Harden, of course we've already talked about Harden and his ownership, but if you're playing a bunch of lineups, just build some lineups where Harden gets hurt in the first quarter. That means bumping up Mike James, bumping up Bruce Brown, bumping up Kevin Durant, bumping up Blake Griffin. Take the time, like if you're using Fantasy Cruncher or something to build lineups, take the time to just build some lineups where you thumbs up, you take, say no Harden in this set of lineups, you thumbs up the guys that are going to benefit or that you would expect to benefit if Harden is out. Just build some lineups that are going to be in really good shape if James Harden gets hurt, because people are like the downside to projections is that you can only project one set of outcomes, and people are very bad about understanding that and doing things to make it so they cover different ranges of outcomes. So that's one spot where I think naturally, and of course, like James Harden playing is going to drive Mike James ownership through the floor, and it would be insane if it didn't. But there's still a decent chance James Harden just gets hurt tonight. Like it's a hamstring injury. It sounds like he's coming back basically because Kyrie got hurt. So I haven't seen anything saying like James Harden feels fantastic. I've seen James Harden really wants to play. So that's how I would approach this slate if I'm trying to be different. And in general on showdown slates, doing things like, okay, what if Brook Lopez gets in foul trouble? I'll play more Bobby Portis. But like Portis is going to get ownership anyway because of his price tag. I think the spot where you're naturally overpaying for somebody based on the most likely outcome, which is, Harden just plays and he's fine. That's Mike James. That's Blake Griffin. That's Bruce Brown. Those are the guys that at their prices are not going to get ownership because Harden is playing.
The one thing that I have trouble with, though, is if you take that approach, yes, of course, you're bumping up Mike James, you're bumping up Bruce Brown. Maybe even Tyler Johnson gets some minutes. But the issue is there's no clear-cut favorite here, and we see it all the time. So there's a lot you have to get right. You have to get James Harden to leave the game early, and then you have to figure out whether it's going to be Brown that has the big game or James that has the big game or Tyler Johnson that gets additional minutes. It is kind of difficult, but I agree with the approach. I just think it's, you have to do both. You have to get both right, and that's kind of tough. It's not like there's a clear cut. This guy gets 30 minutes if James Harden goes out.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And it's a low probability thing. I mean, because again, I think the most likely thing is that Harden plays decent, plays good minutes, probably doesn't play like 40 or anything, but and it is just fine. I think that's the most likely scenario, but it's basically, to me, and I certainly wouldn't be projecting him to get hurt if I'm playing like one or two lineups, but if you are someone running 150 lineups or 100 lineups or 50, whatever, just make whatever percentage that you're comfortable with, 5, 10% of your lineups, just say, okay, these are the lineups where these are the best lineups I could make if I assume Harden gets hurt. So then you're just, again, going in the cruncher, you're bumping all those guys up, seeing what your lineups look like, and then just getting a nice mix of the guys that would benefit if Harden gets hurt.
59 likes away from 300 here on a Tuesday night single game slate. I think we can make that happen. I think we can do so. If you came in late, maybe you forgot. That's all right. Hit that thumbs up if you enjoy the show. You want to help support us here. We're 59 away from 300. We'll keep powering through that. Let's hit on a couple super chats here, Adam. We got God Sham God says Harris Forbes or Green Connaughton as FanDuel GPP utility options.
Green Connaughton or Harris Forbes?
Mm-hmm.
I would lean Harris Forbes. The reason is that Harris is the one guy in that group that you can expect to play a ton of minutes, probably playing 36 to 38 minutes. Not that you feel great about it, but you're not going to feel good about the production of any of those guys. And then Forbes at least has a path. He's played like 15 minutes in each of the last two games. He's most likely going to be behind Connaughton in the rotation. But if Forbes comes out there and has one of those games where he's just knocks down, the first 4 threes he takes, he can easily just take 5 minutes away from Connaughton and get to 20 minutes or so. So I think just the minutes for Harris is what seals it for me, because like you're not going to feel super confident in Jeff Green. You're certainly not going to feel confident in Connaughton. I'll take the one guy that I think is playing 36 plus minutes out of that group.
Les Gray says thoughts on Mike James with Harden starting. Thanks for the super chat. Less unnecessary though, because we already covered that. I'll tell you what, if you hit the join button down below, it's $2.99. And anytime we get anytime we get questions from our members here, from the guys with the loyalty badges, We'll always hit those. We'll do our best to, of course, take it priority. Of course, super chats as well. But if you don't want to keep sending super chats, that's one way to do it. Just join the family here at Awesemo. Catch that shout out and some other cool stuff. Of course, priority questions as well. But you answered that. We both answered that question, right? Like Mike James with James Harden starting. You play Mike James if you think James Harden is going to get hurt.
Yeah, that's the. And it's not even if you think he's going to get hurt. Like that's and
no, you're hedging.
I know you understand it, but like it's just it keeps coming up in YouTube chat. Like it's a hamstring injury. I know he's going to get hurt. Like no, you don't.
No,
but it's not a matter.
We don't know he's going to play 40 minutes either.
Right.
The point is there's total uncertainty. Is the point?
Right. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you think is going to happen. It's in situations like this, it's just understanding the things that can happen and the things that are relatively likely to happen in this game. James Harden pulling up with a hamstring injury is certainly on the table of, that wouldn't be surprising whatsoever. And if that happens, you're going to wish you had Mike James in your lineup. So like you're not putting Mike James in thinking that Mike James does well or, predicting that Harden gets hurt. It's just understanding that you can win a lot of money if James Harden gets hurt and you have Mike James.
And I'll tell you what, it's a lot more likely of a situation than people winning tens of thousands of dollars with JaVale McGee in their lineups because Nikola Jokic got ejected for a flagrant 2 late in game 4. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I'm not saying go through every player and say, well, what if Kevin Durant gets hurt? What if Blake Griffin gets hurt? What if Jeff Green gets hurt?
What if Joe Harris kills somebody on the court and gets, arrested?
Right. Yeah. You're saying, I mean, there's an actual relatively good chance when you talk about injuries that James Harden's just going to pull up lame 8 minutes into the game. Which hopefully he doesn't, because I'm still leaning towards playing him in cash. Yeah,
I'm hoping he doesn't too. It's just those things are possible. We're not just throwing wild conspiracy theories out there.
I'm bracing myself to just launch my phone across my apartment when I watch Harden pull up lame, and then I start getting tweets on Twitter like, you said at the 8-minute mark.
Yeah, that would be oh God. Yeah, and then realize you have no Mike James. But,
and then realize I'm just losing every dollar I played.
Yeah. Lear YT says, would you play Griffin and Green in the same lineup?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'm still I'd be more against playing Green and Claxton together. And this is talking tournaments cash. I couldn't care less. I still think Griffin gets his around 30 minutes if he's not in foul trouble. Again, that playing time does fluctuate though with Green back, because you have Claxton that can take minutes, you have Green that can take minutes. We didn't really touch too much on Claxton, but I'll talk about it here too, because it has to do with this question. Claxton's rotation last game was extremely weird. He played 2 minutes in the first half. He picked up 3 minutes, picked up 2 fouls, so maybe that's why he went to the bench. But then even in the second half, he came in, he played a minute and a half, went back to the bench, and then he came back in for 7 minutes. So if you just look at that first half and kind of the beginning of that second half, it's pretty concerning. And you can at least see how the rotation could go tonight, where let's say Blake Griffin plays 28 to 30 minutes. Then Jeff Green gets some backup center minutes. Claxton plays 8 minutes, right? That certainly could happen. Or Claxton could just be the backup center. Jeff Green could be the backup 4, and Durant plays at the 3, and they play some bigger lineups. So there's multiple ways this can go. I think that is one spot to pay attention to, though, especially because you will get ownership on Claxton at that price tag. I think he's a good salary saver just because, he lets you pay up for stuff. But I think the range of minutes on Claxton is a lot wider now that Jeff Green is back as well. And it's wider on Griffin too.
That's a great way to put it. I'm a Tulsa dog. You got the badge too. That's our guy. Says, Laffy, don't be a meanie like Josh. And then 720 Red Dog, he's been hanging out here for a while, says, Laffy seems a bit cranky. Hope you're okay, brother. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. I'm assuming it's from telling the guy, a lot of times people will this, you'll have people super chat us the same amount every day with a question. What I was saying is don't give us money and every day, and we'll still answer your questions. I was trying to be helpful, but I don't know. No good deed goes unpunished, right?
Well, I personally think that you telling people not to give me money is you being a dick.
You're not going to see it anyway. I'm going to get that tattooed on my forehead. No good deed goes unpunished. I tell that to my wife all the time. I'll do something, but of course I'll do it wrong because you do it then, right?
Yeah. Hate when that happens. Deal with it all the time.
I'm sure you have before. All I'm saying is I did it my way. You want it done your way.
Yeah. Do it yourself.
You do it.
Yeah, for sure.
I try, man. I try. I usually fail. All right. So I wanted to do an optimal lineup segment because thanks, Red Dog. Appreciate you, man. Just to get your idea on where we go with the optimal and kind of parlay that into the next segment, which is chopper solo. And what I mean by that is, is this one of those slates where we can really get different enough to actively engage I don't want to chop this with a bunch of people, or this is the best lineup. If it chops 1,000 ways, it does, but it's still what I think is the best lineup. So when we're talking from an optimal lineups perspective, how do you approach a slate like this? And do you think the optimal is going to be, uber popular today compared to what we've seen on other slates?
I think you'll see a little bit more variation today, probably just because there is the uncertainty around Harden. That being said, the reason you see stuff duplicated so much is just there's X number of people that just use our projections and run with it. There's X number of people that use, other sites. And then there's people that aggregate and just get the same lineup. So you're always going to get those top projected lineups, whatever they happen to be. But I do think there'll be a little bit more variation today just because you're going to have some people that normally would play this lineup with Harden say, I'm not playing Harden in this lineup. But the way I approach it, because I'm just playing cash games and throwing my cash lineup into tournaments, is obviously I just don't care. But thinking it through and thinking about it in theory, the way I would approach it, and Josh disagrees with me, we've argued about this a lot in Slack. If I'm playing 5 lineups or 10 lineups, I would care a lot about trying to minimize.
I think you've changed his mind, by the way. He kind of admitted to it on the strategy.
Okay, yeah. Well, I've been showing him my Roto Tracker results every day. So
sometimes that's all you need, right? No words can express it nearly as well as see all that green. Yeah, that's right. From doing what you're not doing.
Yeah, I haven't been posting screenshots on Twitter. I've just been posting them to Josh in Slack.
Like you used to do to Dan Strafford. Remember?
Exactly.
Hey, Dan.
Yep. But yeah, so the way that I
would
approach
an asshole.
The way I would approach it, just thinking through the way things are. If I'm playing 5 to 10 lineups in a large field tournament, I would care very much about trying to minimize my dupes because in 5 to 10 lineups, you can make 5 to 10 very good lineups that are not the top couple projected lineups. Where I think you should just suck it up and also play the best lineups is when you're playing 150 lineups on a 1-game slate. I know you're going to make the most money if one of your heavily duplicated lineups doesn't win. That goes without saying. But in NBA, it's the most projectable sport. And also, so you're not going to get, we've talked about it before. It's not like NFL where you can throw a $600 wide receiver in there and say, man, if this guy catches his one target for 50 yards and a touchdown, I'm just going to win all the money. It doesn't matter if Giannis Antetokounmpo comes off the bench and knocks down his only shot. You're getting 2 or 3 points for it. So in NBA, you just don't have those drastic outcomes. So there's that. And then also, how many times, if you make 150 lineups on a 1-game slate and you start looking at, so that's including those top projected lineups. So then you start scrolling down and looking at lineup, 155, 160, 165. How good are those lineups? You've got to be getting to some pretty bad lineups at that point. So that's the other thing for me where it's just if you're playing 150 lineups, 1 out of 150 is less than 1%. Just take the $500 you win if you duplicate with 1,000 people or whatever it is. You still have 149 other lineups to use. On a slate like this, you could make the argument, I think, that you need more lineups. You can make more good lineups because, again, of the Harden stuff. If you're going to allocate some lineups towards what if Harden gets hurt, then of course you have less lineups to allocate towards what if he doesn't get hurt or whatever. But just in general, to me, I'm not that concerned about dupes as long as I'm playing either, in my case, my 1 cash lineup, or 150. If I'm playing 5 to 10 lineups, then I am concerned about it because there's just a lot of really good lineups I can play that aren't going to be duplicated or duplicated as much.
Where are you going to get showdown information like this? I mean, we try and cover all the bases for you fellas. And Josh of Los Angeles, by the way, appreciate that, man. Said thank you for making showdown slates more interesting. I don't know if I read that one already. I don't think I did, but if I did, well, you get a double shout out today. And then we had another super chat, Adam, from Her TV. All caps, Harris, Brown, or Middleton for the pro spot on FanDuel.
I mean, if it doesn't affect anything, then Middleton.
Yeah,
if you're not sacrificing stuff.
I mean, on FanDuel, you just want the highest scoring player there. So
well, right, but you still have to make a lineup.
Right. No, of course. But what I'm saying is, if there's no context to the question, the obvious answer is Middleton. Yeah,
for sure.
All right. So that was a great explanation for that, man. And I think, even I get caught up in that. Josh and I talk about it all the time too. I do think there are going to be days though, where you can make good decisions that put you separate you in a spot where you don't have to chop with a thousand different people. like slates are different, right? There's always going to be opportunities where you might find a spot that people really aren't on. And you think like this guy should get minutes. You look at popcorn machine, you see the rotations from last game and you say, you know, he got a lot of minutes. He was in foul trouble. He was going to close out the game. This happened. Like there's a lot of different things that sometimes it's not frequent, but sometimes the field just doesn't pick up on it and it will pay off from time to time. But this slate doesn't feel like one where you have those opportunities.
So, I mean, I think you actually kind of do, again, because of the Harden thing.
Harden, right. That's fair. Yeah, that's
right.
Fair.
So you can actually make lineups on this slate where, again, it's a low probability thing, but there's that pretty clear path to where the entire projections would just change if Harden gets hurt. But outside of that, you know, again, it's just so hard because, like, everyone understands that if Brook Lopez gets in foul trouble, Bobby Portis probably plays more. So you're still going to get enough lineups like doing that, and Portis just gets enough ownership in general. You know, it's just, to me, you know, and again, if you're playing like 150 lineups on most slates, it's just really, really difficult to make 150 really good lineups if you're excluding the ones that are the best.
All right.
Someone asked in chat who Harden guards. I don't know. I don't really care all that much. My guess would be PJ Tucker. Like, I assume they're not going to want him doing much on the defensive end if they can help it. And they have the guys. I mean, they have Brown, they have Harris, they have Durant to handle, you know, Drew, Middleton. Blake's been dealing with Giannis. I would assume James Harden just goes and stands next to PJ Tucker.
I wasn't sure if they were trolling or not, because remember we used to get those questions asking like who's guarding who on every game.
Yeah, but the reason I went ahead and answered this one is because I could actually see the logic there, where if for whatever reason we thought James Harden was going to have to guard Drew Holiday on a bum hamstring, then like you're bumping up Drew Holiday. But my guess is he just babysits PJ Tucker.
Yeah, and to be fair, James Harden plays defense like he's on a bum hamstring anyway.
He can play defense though.
But you know what? It's fair. He can't. He just usually decides not to.
Sure.
But he will surprise. In the postseason, I would anticipate James Harden.
He steps it up.
He does. He doesn't get credit for that. But whenever I get a chance to kind of just rip on James Harden defense, I have to take the opportunity. But you're right. He has plenty of times, plenty of instances where his defense actually looks. And it's funny because as someone that would assume that he's bad at defense, you might watch him in a postseason game or a big game and be like, wait, that's not what I was told about James Harden. But
right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's as a completely different point. For the most part, when you talk about like the stars in the NBA, they all can defend. It's an effort thing. Like during the regular season, they're not going to expend it. And if they have to carry the entire team offensively, they're not going to do it like Bradley Beal. But yeah, I mean, these guys, they're the best athletes on the floor. Most of them can defend if they actually need to.
For sure. All right, let's throw to some top props here. Of course, you can go to oddshopper.com, totally free, everything. And there's some amazing opportunities on some books that you should jump into if given the chance, because they're trying to get people over there. They're trying to get people to sign up so they can siphon off users from other books and give them $500 bets to just insane stuff. Yeah, you'll see. But oddshopper.com, the best thing about it really, and yeah, you can get there straight from the Awesemo homepage. It's totally free, but you can shop odds from all these different books. You can set watch lists, bet trackers. You can type player names into player props and pull all of their props up. Like there's a million different things, but the biggest thing is to sustainably win in sports betting. You have to shop around. You have to find where the best odds are. Jordan, go to like Game Odds or something where there's actually, because I think a lot of these were pulled with the James Harden thing, and then they'll come back up. But yeah, just check it out. It's free. It's awesome for football. You can do NFL futures on there right now, win totals, player futures and stuff, like whatever you want. You can check them out. You don't have to go each book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just go straight there and make it happen. One that I like today is Mike James under 14.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Last time I looked at him, it was still on the board. It was still on the board on several books. If that's the case, and I'm assuming that James Harden gets the minutes, Mike James under 14.5 to me is a strong bet. And the under wasn't juiced heavy at all. What do you have?
Yeah, I like that. I had Bruce Brown under 11.5 points because I didn't think he was going to start. Giving him a few more minutes for starting, I still think that's a good one. I have him at like 9.4 points now in 26 minutes. So I still like Bruce Brown under 11.5 if that is still there, which it looks like it is.
What do you think of Blake Griffin under 18.5 points, rebounds, and assists, given his struggles playing alongside Harden? Now, he hasn't played a ton of minutes with Harden. I think it's like 170, but he's been a 0.66 fantasy point per minute guy, just completely ineffective playing with Harden on the floor.
I like it for a couple of reasons. You just have multiple outs. For one, like you said,
he didn't play a lot in the second half. Sorry, in the second half last year.
He's been less productive alongside Harden. You also have the playing time outs where like Jeff Green steals minutes from him and he plays 24 minutes instead of 32 or whatever. So there's just a variety of ways for him to get there. If he plays 30 minutes, I still have the under. I have it at like 17. So I'm with you. I just think there's a lot of ways you can win that taking the under.
Yeah, the under on a couple bucks, minus 108 too. So I like that. You got anything else?
I think over 18.5 points for James Harden is pretty interesting.
That's again really interesting, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's dependent, like, of course, on how many minutes you think he plays and if you think he's relatively healthy. But if he plays anywhere remotely close to mid-30s, he should get over that.
All right, we're almost there. We're also 50 away from 400 likes. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. 450 away. Appreciate all you guys that have done so already. I think we can make this happen. So let's wrap it up with our final thoughts on both of these teams. If there's a few players that people asked about that we hadn't talked about, we can do all of that right now, and then wrap this one up and get straight to tip off. And remember, I forgot to mention this, NBA Live Before Lock promo code gets you 15% off an Awesemo Plus weekly pass. Awesemo Plus, everything included in it, from ownership projections, player projections, top stack tool, boom bust tool, top pitchers, optimal lineups, all the articles, you name it. NBA Live Before Lock, all one word in caps at awesemo.com/join when you go over there. And if you want to check out some other stuff, maybe you just want all NBA content, our Express Pass for less than $5 a week, Showdown content, all of our tools for Showdown and articles. If you want to make a commitment out of it, go the full year. You can do one sport. You can do every sport for the month, the year, whatever it is. And we have the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. But these tools created and used by the #1 ranked DFS player and Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. He's won a lot of money, millions to be exact, playing with these exact tools that are on the site. So check them out if you want. And if you're not quite ready yet, maybe you're not in the position to do so, go ahead and check out the free content we have. Adam, we're all right up against it. So just close this one out with your final thoughts on both teams.
The mid-range is pretty weak. You know, like Middleton, Holiday, I think are very good, but I don't really like the pricing on Lopez, Joe Harris, those guys, outside of like the largest field tournaments. So I think it's a slate where you're obviously how you feel about James Harden kind of shapes what you're doing. I think it's a good idea in tournaments to be overweight on Harden as the third most expensive guy on the slate, and just kind of hope that he's healthy. But again, that really just comes down to how risk averse you are. There's a lot of spots in the front court on the Nets to be creative, whether it's, bumping Green up and thinking Claxton loses minutes, thinking Griffin loses minutes, what have you. I think you can do that. And then on the Bucks, looking to Forbes instead of Connaughton as a value guy, I think is a decent spot in tournaments. Just, hoping that because Connaughton did well last game, people go to him instead of Forbes.
I knew we were up against it, but I forgot that we were literally up against Lock because you and I never do Live Before Lock.
Yeah. So nobody got any of that information.
Nobody got anything, but check out awesemo.com/join because it's pretty awesome. Anyway, I think we covered pretty much everything.
Yeah, right? I didn't say anything new.
Yeah. All right, guys. Hey, appreciate you. This has been fun. Maybe Adam and I will be on another Live Before Lock throughout the week and then make a transition over to NBA as next week starts and the finals of the conference finals start. Good luck tonight, everybody. We'll see you back here very soon. This has been the Awesemo Live Before Lock show presented by No House Advantage.